The non-test games on Lions tours, how much bearing do these games have on the actual results of the test series? We will have a look at some of the previous test series from 2001 through to 2017. Have a look at the actual results and then what happened with the test, but also like how easy or difficult were some of these games that the Lions were playing. The Lions, as they are, I record this video currently in South Africa, they have had a few relatively straightforward victories over local South African opposition. As I record this, they haven't yet played the South African A side, which looks like it could be a bit of a rude awakening. And they have played Japan. None of the games have been kind of too strenuous. Maybe the Japan game slightly, and the first half of the second Sharks game. But have they truly been tested? Not that much. Let's have a look at these previous tours and see if there's anything comparable. Did they have particularly hard build-up games, and did that make for better results in the test? Did they have easy build-up games, and did that result into worse performances, or is the opposite true? We'll have a look, and you guys can let me know your thoughts. So we'll start with 2001. The Tour of Australia was an unsuccessful tour in the end, with the one win, which was the opening test, and then the two losses. But they got that opening win on the back of mostly pretty straightforward results, to be honest. Of the 7 build-up games they had, there were only 2 games which were kind of even relatively close, and the 2 games that were close were one against Australia A, which is the game they lost, which is kind of ominous given the, well, not about ominous, but it's maybe a bit similar to what we're seeing on the South African tour potentially. And they beat the Brumbies by 2 points. The other games, like they beat Western Australia 116-10. They beat the Reds 42-8. They beat the Waratahs 41-24. They beat the Queensland Presidents 83-6. So they had some proper easy results in the build-up. And then they went in and won the first test 29-13. But it was the final 2 tests that were kind of their undoing. So it didn't seem like, from those results, that the relatively easy prep with one tough game thrown in really cost them at all. You do have to keep in mind that Brumbies game that was close was between the first and second test. And that's going to be one thing about the 2021 tour, is that it's the 3 tests in a row. All these previous tours had games in between the first and second tests, to like a midweek game, basically. So yeah, for that tour, unsuccessful. First test was a win on the back of largely easy results with one tough one in the build-up. 2005, again, an unsuccessful tour. That one was in New Zealand. That was probably the worst of the lot for the Lions. They went 0-3 against the All Blacks, so they didn't pick up any results. And there were a lot of games on that tour. There's nine non-test games. They played a lot of the New Zealand provincial teams, like Otago and Auckland Bay of Plenty. They also played a game against Argentina at home. Played the Māori All Blacks as well. And interestingly, although there were some blowouts in that tour, like they beat Manawatu 109 points to 6 after the first test, but before the second test. And they beat Taranaki 36-14. They beat Otago 30 points to 19. A lot of the games were kind of close-ish. Like, they drew with Argentina 25 apiece. They beat Southland by 10 points. They beat Auckland by 4 points. They lost to the Māori All Blacks 19 points to 13. So, not the easiest ride. Although, of all the kind of close games, you could say, 4 of the 9 games were relatively interesting. Either a loss or kind of a close victory. 2 of them were the games like between the first and the second test, and between the second and the third test. So, not really the test team. It was the dirt trackers that were kind of playing in those games. So, you could maybe discount those games a little bit, but they certainly got a tough one against the Māori All Blacks before they got into the actual tests proper. Somebody's just fired up a line trimmer, so I'm just going to quickly close that door. But yeah, like I said, the 2005 tour wasn't that successful. The 3 tests, they lose 21-3, 48-18, and 38-19. So despite the fact that they had some relatively competitive matches in the build-up, the tour itself was about as bad as it gets. I know there's deeper reasons for it. The O'Driscoll injury and whatnot, was not helpful. And there was apparently bad blood between some of the guys. Likewise with the 01 tour, to be fair. But anyway, just looking at that, it seems like it wasn't a huge help to have some of the games be relatively close. The 2009 tour, which is maybe relevant in terms of it was the most recent tour to South Africa, barring the current one, it's a mixture. Obviously, they were successful. They didn't lose any of the games in the non-tests. They did have one draw against the emerging Springboks, which is kind of close to South Africa A, I guess. That was between the first and the second test, though. So again, probably not the team that went and played the test. That would have been your midweek guys. The other games, though, was a mixture. There were some blowouts. The Golden Lions got beaten 74 points to 10. The Sharks got beaten 39-3. But the Cheetahs 26-24, that's a close game. Western Province 26-23, that's a close game. So it was a bit of a mixture. But they still did drop the first two tests to the British and Irish Lions. They won that third test, but remember, there was kind of a changed lineup for that third test for the Springboks, so you could say they maybe let the foot off the throat a wee bit, but either way, both the tests, the first two, were close, like 26-21 and 28-25. So a mixture of some kind of comfortable games and tough ones proved to be a pretty close series. That second test, if it had gone to a draw, would have made the third test really interesting. 2013, that's a successful Lions tour. It's the only winning Lions tour we've got on the board here. That was the tour to Australia. And again, they did drop one game in the non-test games. And again, it's a bit of a mixture. There's a couple of close games, but some pretty easy ones as well. They beat the Barbars 59 points to 8, so pretty big hiding. They beat the Waratahs 47-17, the Force 69-17, combined country team 64-0. So some proper big blowouts that you could argue, kind of like the current tour, aren't serving the players that much use, but they must be doing all right because the Lions end up winning the tour. They do beat the Reds 22-12, which you could say is a competitive game. And they beat the Brumbies. Sorry, they lost to the Brumbies 14 points to 12. But that was right before the first test. So that was the game before. So the first game goes the Lions' way, 23-21. The second game, after they've beaten the Rebels midweek 35-0, goes to a loss, 16 points to 15. And then the third test is the one where the Lions really blow Australia away, 41 points to 16. So looking at that, you could argue that having a few less than strenuous games actually kind of helped out. Probably built some combinations, let the guys enjoy themselves a bit rather than getting too down if they're not blowing teams off the park like they are supposed to. But yeah, ultimately a successful tour with only the one dropped midweek game and largely some pretty easy games in the build-up. The most recent one is 2017. That's the drawn tour of New Zealand, and arguably the hardest by far. The hardest tour in the build-up, a pretty grueling one. They were largely written off, the British and Irish Lions, over here. I remember the media kind of going gangbusters about how they were going to get done by the All Blacks. First game against the Provincial Barbarians team, 13 points to 7. It was a close victory. It was an ugly game, that one. I looked at the Provincial Barbarians lineup, and there's a few guys in that lineup have gone on to become All Blacks, so it was maybe not as weak a team as it was kind of billed to be. But at the time, it was a team full of kind of less than known guys. But it was a close game. Then they lost to the Blues. They beat the Crusaders 12 points to 3, so kind of a tough win. Lost to the Highlanders. Beat the Māori All Blacks 32-10, which is kind of the easiest result of the lot. And then also the Chiefs 34-6. First test is a loss after having a bit of a grueling start. Then the draw with the Hurricanes for the midweek guys. Second test is a win. Third test is the draw. So 5 of the 7 build-up games were really quite competitive. It's just the Chiefs and the Māori All Blacks games, which were kind of easy-ish games, but they're not putting any more than 30-odd points on a team. They're not getting 50, 60, 70-point wins here. So a tough build-up ends up with what was a... no one's satisfied with a draw, but honestly, you would say it's a bit of a successful result, and that it's always hard, based on this, for the British and Irish Lions teams to have successful tours. They're always kind of up against it, and that they are the touring team having to get these guys who don't know each other to gel together. But yeah, it's an interesting look. I don't think there's anything definitive there that says, yes, easy games are better, or no, harder games are better, because you had hard games and you had easy games and you had two relatively successful tours. You had some easy games in these ones, but unsuccessful tours. It's hard to say. I think probably a mix is probably best for everybody, because you don't really want the guys to be absolutely exhausted having ground out victories every week in the build-up. But likewise, just having virtual training runs are probably not doing anybody that much good either. But anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts. How do you think the midweek and prep games carry forward into the test series? I think any time these guys spend playing together is certainly helpful. When it gets to the point, if it's 70, 80 points, maybe you're losing a little bit of it. But if there's times in the game when the teams are tested, they're having to defend, they're having to build through phases to attack, all that's kind of experience and chemistry in the bank when you get ready for the test series. But yep, you guys let me know your thoughts. I look forward to seeing how South Africa A goes. By the time this video is up, that game is probably already done and dusted. But that will be an interesting indication as to how things are going to go in this Lions tour. And it will also be interesting to see if the Lions can go all wins in their build-up games. Again, if this video is already up and they've lost to South Africa A, this will look a bit silly. But if they could go all wins, which they haven't managed to do, they've always managed to drop or draw a game at some point in the build-up. But anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts, and yeah, I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.